Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. I'm really excited today to talk with Rachel Hutchisson, CEO of Common Impact. Rachel, welcome to the Nonprofit Show.
Thank you so much. It is great to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here because we're going to be talking about unlocking talent, skill-based volunteering. This is a new approach. Actually, I shouldn't say it's a new approach. It's a different approach that unfortunately a lot of us in the sector don't think about. And so this is going to be a fascinating discussion. And I'm just thrilled you're here to help all of our viewers and listeners learn about skills-based volunteering. Easy for me to say, huh?
Yeah.
Another thing that's easy to say is to recognize our amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, Fundraisers Friday, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that have joined us day in and day out, year in, year out for a lot of them. And we are quickly approaching our 1200th episode. And so these are the folks that make it possible for us to bring these amazing conversations that we do each and every day. Again, I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I have this amazing team of co-hosts. They're from throughout the country. They do all different things and serve as leaders in the nonprofit sector. Incredibly diverse in terms of where they serve, how they serve, and who they serve. I'm flying solo today, but I hope you've been able to get to know them and meet them. Okay, Rachel Hutchisson, CEO of Common Impact. Two great words, impact and common. Put it together for me. What do you all do?
So Common Impact is a nonprofit that's been around for 24 years. And what we do is we connect a company's desire to do good in the world with opportunities to do that through nonprofit organizations. So we're really act as a bridge. So companies are seeking to do, important work, create social impact, create good in the communities that they care about, and they want to equip their employees to be able to do that. So that's what we do. We step in and help create that happen. We're that almost extension of their team, working with them to help engage that company's people with really valuable, meaningful opportunities with nonprofits that drive that organization's mission.
Amazing. Is this kind of location specific or geographically specific, or how do you work within this country, North America, the world? What does that look like?
Yeah, and actually, Common Impact is known for doing a really good job of taking on the virtual work when the pandemic hit. It's something that the organization dealt with really well. But, it started largely as being things that you would do in person. So think about the corporate world and where work happened. So work was happening in person. And so, volunteer activities might be things that you would do in an office or in the community that your headquarters was based in. But now it really can be anywhere. It can be virtual, which is important because companies have people everywhere. It can be, anywhere in the US. It can be people who are located in different places. It can be in person, which nowadays seems like the exception, but is so incredibly important. We just did an activity with Fidelity last week, and it was, in person, and the joy that people feel when they're in person really just adds to that experience. But it also can be outside of the US, and that can bring its challenges. You have different time zones and you have to work through that and work with partners. But in the US, the UK, Canada, India is an area where a lot of companies, particularly tech companies, have employees. And so it's definitely something that is not just US based.
Wow, it's absolutely fascinating to hear you talk about this, because layered onto this, it's got to be the cultural differences of how we volunteer,
Sure.
like in that. So I find that absolutely fascinating. I think I can already tell we're going to have to get you back on, because that's another conversation that's really, really amazing. But today we want to really dig into skill-based volunteering. So SBV. We were talking in the green room. All too often, we get a group of volunteers in, and it's kind of like, oh, how do we keep them busy for 3 hours? Or
Yeah.
it's just awful. We don't really use their talents. We kind of just entertain them and let them do their thing and then show them on their way. Talk to us about SBV and help us kind of reframe this.
Yeah, I think the point that you made is an excellent one. So, I worked for a number of years at a technology company, and there was a day of caring that was
Yep.
led by the local United Way. And sometimes it was challenging. We actually proactively the company sourced opportunities to make sure they were meaningful because sometimes nonprofits felt they couldn't say no to the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so they came up with something like painting fences or painting walls or weeding gardens. And so you'd send your people there and they would have this experience that actually wasn't meaningful to them. And it did the exact opposite of what you were trying to do, which was, I call it creating agents of good, getting people excited about the fact that they're out there giving back. And so, that creates a real challenge because not every nonprofit has a manual way of giving back, like a food bank. You can pack food and work together, et cetera, but not everyone has something like that. So skills-based volunteerism, which is what Common Impact specializes in, is when you give your professional skills as a volunteer, when you're actually serving, providing whatever it is whatever talents you have, you're using those through your volunteer service. That's full stop what it means.
Mhm. So I'm thinking back to a Fortune 100 company that came on to talk about a new internship program that they were launching, and basically they were taking their high level C-suite and offering to send them out and pair them up with somebody for an extended period of time. They would pay their salary, and then they would allow, and it was a tech company, they would
Mhm.
allow their employees to like embed and really work through some major things. And it was riveting to see that they thought about this, that they were willing to let go their skilled labor. I mean, high
Mhm.
level skilled labor. And so I'm
Mhm.
thinking about this and wondering how many organizations understand this. I mean, and their employees, how many employees understand that this might even be available?
I don't think it's broadly understood, which is kind of interesting because, like, here we are, we're coming up on Giving Tuesday, which is, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and we're talking about giving in all different ways. And volunteerism is something that's deeply baked into the culture of this country. But volunteerism seems to be more the kind of thing you go out and do. And that, that company that you mentioned is really wonderful that they said, hey, take the time and go serve and do it over a period of time. And I deeply believe in mentorship. I think I've been a beneficiary of mentoring relationships, and I love to mentor and sponsor people. But even that is not something that people think of as, they might think of it as service, but they don't necessarily think of it as volunteerism. So, kudos to the company that had that program. They might not have thought of it as skills-based volunteerism, but it really is. And board service is absolutely skills-based volunteerism. Dedicating your time and your expertise, typically for a period of years, sometimes many years, to help govern a nonprofit is, to me, something I've been doing it for more than 25 years, and I find it incredibly fulfilling, sometimes hard, but
Yeah.
really important work.
Yeah. I love that you threw board service into that because we oftentimes separate the two.
Oh,
We will,
it's like they're all in these little buckets, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, not
Yeah.
good. It's really interesting to be rethinking this and recalibrating kind of what we can be doing. But let's talk about going in the other direction. How does SVV really impact our own staffs and then also the retention going the other way? Because this is one of the big things with this
Mhm.
demographic shift in labor,
Mhm.
and everybody's freaked out about labor on both sides, from the
Yeah.
nonprofit to the for-profit. I've got to believe that this makes people more fulfilled and excited about staying with a company.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have two different parties here. And one of the things that I absolutely love about Common Impact is that we work with both the company, who is the customer who comes and says, we want to engage your services to scope and deliver these projects with our employees, but we're also benefiting and working with a nonprofit partner and helping drive their mission work. So it's both. So that question really applies to both. You know, you have the nonprofit staff that often doesn't have the capacity to do everything that it wants to do. And so there's a real benefit of lifting the burden of work, of having the team at the volunteer team act as an extension to the team that you have within your organization, which gets them further. It helps them do more. It helps them establish better infrastructure. There's all sorts of examples of things that volunteers help them do. On the corporate side, there's, you know, some real data about, you know, how people who volunteer feel pride in their company. They want to say thank you to my employer for helping, you know, for providing this opportunity. So it builds pride, it can build longevity, it can build skills, it can be a way to develop leadership skills. So I often tell people that. We were talking about board service a minute ago, and often, you know, when you're working with someone, mentoring them in their early career, sometimes they feel frustrated that they're only doing certain things in their jobs, but they have these other skills that they can't really fully bring to bear in what they're being expected to do. And you know, board service or working on a committee is a really great way to flex those muscles, to get more experience, but also to show off, hey, look, I'm good at this in a community that, you know, because you aren't just defined, as much as work makes us feel this way sometimes. You are not just defined by what you do for work, you know, how you go out and engage in the community, how you develop yourself as a leader. I learned how to be a public speaker by serving in a nonprofit board role where I was standing in the front of the room every month at the meetings, talking, getting comfortable doing that. I was flexing that muscle that I wasn't necessarily. Back at work, I was the ghostwriter. I was writing the speeches the CEO was giving. I wasn't giving them. And so I volunteered for TEDx, and I helped, you know, speakers get ready for that. And then I'm like, I need to do a TEDx talk. Like, so you have these journeys that you can, you know, volunteer work can help you, you know, use these incredibly important skills or try out new skills that you don't necessarily have. So absolutely, there's a deep connection in companies wanting to invest in their people, invest in their skill sets, invest in their leadership, and invest in how they feel about the brand, that kind of pride and connection they feel with the brand. And we see that live in all of our engagements.
Yeah. You know, I think there's more and more research saying that when folks go into, if they're interviewing for a position, that they'll go in and they'll see what the corporate social responsibility is, and where their prospective employer is engaged and how they're engaged. This is something that didn't exist 10 years ago. People weren't really doing it, but now this next generation of staff, this is something that's important. And I love that you brought that up. It's meaningful, and it connects directly back to that brand and brand promise of the corporation. So this has tremendous value all the way around. In some places that maybe we don't necessarily measure or understand. You know, when we talk about the way that this is working, and that it's more than just, here's a paint bucket and a brush, go paint that fence white, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
How should we be thinking about this? And how can we prepare so that we do have a stronger relationship and, frankly, better outcomes? It's not just busy work. What should
Yeah.
we in the nonprofit sector be doing to move this forward?
Yeah, and the value piece, independent sector, which is an organization, you know, in the nonprofit sector, every year publishes data on the value of a volunteer hour. And right now the average is $33. I think it's $33.49, something like that. It's different by state, but when you apply the skills-based lens to that, think about someone who is skilled in marketing or law or HR or technology. Think about the value of an hour. So with that as a basis, organizations, nonprofits should understand that skills-based volunteerism goes, it could be something that takes place over a couple of hours. It could be something that takes place over a day of service. It could be a multiple month engagement. There's not one shape. It depends on the project, and it also depends on the capacity of the organization that wants to do that project. And the reality is that the nonprofit does have to be ready to engage, because volunteers can't just come in and do something without your help. You're really partnering with them. That word is incredibly important. And the corporate volunteers are really relying on their nonprofit partners to help them. And so that's a lot of the space that Common Impact navigates, that, understanding and helping to select a nonprofit to work with, and making sure they understand what they have to bring to the table, and helping the corporates understand what they need to bring, so that together during a designated period of time, whether it's hours, day, months, they are able to accomplish what they set out to do. And so you really have to start by making sure the organization, the nonprofit itself, has to understand if they're really committed to this. Like, is it something that they have support for in their organization? Companies talk about this as the business case. I'm not sure that every nonprofit would think of it that way, but if you're going to bring in people virtually or in person to work with you on something, are the people who need to be at the table in the project, are they going to be available? And given that nonprofits face a lot of constraints, that's an important thing to think about. So that's the first thing. And, then you have to be thinking about, like, what is it that we would like to ask this group to do? And it might help to just give you some examples of what groups have done. There's a lot of times we're doing work with in HR, human resources, in marketing, in financial areas, or in technology. Those are really good examples. And so when a nonprofit is thinking about how could someone help us, you could look at something like, so there's an organization called Rebuilding Together North Texas. And this is a nonprofit that helps low-income people, seniors, people with disabilities, stay in their houses. And so they do, lots of different hands-on work, but they also need to build capacity, because there is a whole lot of need. And so a group from Fannie Mae actually helped develop a financial forecasting and grants management tool to help them better forecast, their financial concerns, and also to look at which grants were they most likely to bring in. So this is something that you would think would be typically a business-minded thing. But then once the organization has it, it has a long shelf life. They can use it for a really long time. So, they're managing their finances better, they're focusing their grant asks better, they're understanding better why they're getting what they're getting in terms of funding, which is going to help them much more than a team coming in and building a ramp. Now, we worked with a great organization in my previous job called Operation Home that did things like build ramps. And those are important too. But this is a deeper commitment, So there's another really common skills-based volunteerism opportunity is helping an organization deal with the selection of technology. So Welsh Women's Aid works with survivors of domestic violence, and they needed to get a new CRM, a new customer relationship management system, which is typically used in a nonprofit for fundraising, keeping track of all the people they care about. And so a group of employees from Twilio, which is a technology company, doesn't sell this kind of technology, but is a tech company, helped put together this kind of, assessment. What are all the considerations? What's the matrix you should use? How should they look at tech? When they were going and choosing the software for themselves. And you could say, well, that's like so unemotional that they're doing this tech assessment. Well, sometimes, so what? It's unemotional. The work, the thing that's going to result from that volunteer work is going to help them raise more money, be in more frequent contact with people, tell their story better, be more efficient, which means they are going to help more people. They are going to make a bigger impact with people who are suffering from domestic abuse. I mean, that's the emotion. Like in some ways, it might help even more than someone who volunteered to take tickets at an event. You know, that
Right.
value piece is something to think about.
Right. Well, and I think that, what a great example, Rachel, because those people that had to sit down and use the skills that they used every day to be strategic and thoughtful about technology, that's a marvelous fit. And that's a skill that domestic violence shelter certainly didn't possess. Right.
Yeah,
And
and
so to
thinking about
marry those two,
the corporate employees don't have all the same needs and desires. You have
yes,
introverts, you have extroverts, you have people
yeah,
who, want to take something and work on it on their own. They have different skills. So the traditional get together in person volunteer activity might not be as appealing. People feel very validated when they get to use their skills that are
yeah,
special to them, and then they see, oh my goodness, these people are so excited that we did this for them. Like,
yeah.
that wasn't hard for me, but wow, that made me feel good. The other really great example is developing policies, writing handbooks, helping with branding assets, things that a lot of nonprofits, really can benefit from that. And it's not hard for someone in a company to say, I'll go get you samples of policies. I'll help you, with this piece of your employee handbook. I'll help you develop a disaster plan. Like, that's a really helpful, long lasting kind of thing that is skills based.
I love this conversation because we talk about this all the time. Like, you need a policy for this. You got to
Mm-hmm.
have a, procedure for that. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can just see, these small nonprofits, CEOs, executive directors going, yeah, duh, I know I need that, but how am I going to get it done? Right?
Yeah.
I'm fighting the fires over here. So I love this engagement piece. Because again, I think to use your example, we're shamefully thinking about painting that little fence as
Yeah.
opposed to
And
getting our volunteers to do, more strategic and bigger picture thinking.
yeah, instead of having someone, say, look, could we have somebody, like, could we have a group read our employee handbook and tell us the gaps of what we think they're missing? Or could they help us establish some social media policies, or help us learn how to do the basic nuts and bolts of social media, or maybe what we should do on Giving Tuesday, or think about a campaign? And there are constraints, companies and employees don't have all the time in the world to do this. They have to figure out, is this a short-term engagement? Is this a day? Is this around another activity we're doing? But I think nonprofits could really open up their minds
Yeah.
about what's possible. Um, and not treat it as a one-off. I mean, so many of the companies that we work with, like Common Impact, to work with the organizations that receive grants from them, or who they have in their community. Sometimes they rely on us to source those organizations, but many times nonprofits will just think, well, there's a company over there, even in their own community, and oh, they should give to us. And it's like, well, do they know you? Like, I know
Right.
when I was a CSR professional for many years, and I would get many requests out of the blue, and our events next week, will you give us money? It's like, I don't even know you. And so the ones that did get to know us and figured out how our needs were aligned, or our programs could be aligned, we had great relationships with. And so when you're thinking about skills-based volunteerism, you want to say, who do we already know? Is this a way to deepen a relationship? Is this the way to begin a relationship? But everything should be on a continuum, so that you're not just saying, oh, we did it and we're done, thanks very much. They say in fundraising, you have to say thank you 9 times, 7 or 9 times, something like that. And taking the different steps, and we've seen that. We've seen teams at companies, Fidelity being one of them, where they did a project, and that organization then was able to go deeper and do another project that took the work further. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, in terms of corporate, social responsibility and investment, it's not just that one person making the decision about where the corporation's going to invest or sponsor or underwrite. I think they're going back to their staff and saying, what's important to you? Because of this retention issue that we were just talking about, right?
Yeah.
They're going back to their staff and saying, do you want to support animal welfare, or do you want to support education, or domestic violence, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think drawing that arc, it makes everybody more successful. We don't have a lot of time, and you have been so fascinating to talk to. Let's talk about this issue of relationships and planning for this. You said something that just got my goat, because I hear this all the time. That's like, my event's next week. We want you to, be a sponsor. It's like, yeah, no, that doesn't work. How far out in the future should we be thinking about this? And what are corporate partners looking for in terms of that planning? Are they, a quarter out, a year out? How does that look so that we can meet the demands of what our corporate partners are looking for?
I would say long-term planning is really important for your first engagement. I would start, if you're from the nonprofit perspective, reach out to the companies you already know, so that you can figure out, when, do the companies have, always go in with that inquisitive hat on, like, hey, company, not just we have this need for you, but do you have certain times in the year when you get people together where you have volunteer activities, figuring out their calendar so that you don't hit them like right at the end of a quarter, and you don't realize end of quarter for a company is often a very busy time because of financial closing books and all of that. But figure out there what's good for them, what works for them, but also talking about like, what do they care about and what are their pillars? And so that relationship building should begin right away, and with an open mind that you might not find a fit, but it's worth it to get to know them. If you do have an organization with a fit, it can take months, it can take a quarter, it can take 6 months, depending on what it is you're planning. You don't just walk in and say, I want to do this, and they say yes. Like, think ahead. Think, if you're in planning right now for 2025, if there's a project that you might want to have a company help you with in 2025, start cultivating that just like you would cultivate someone giving to you and giving you more than just a small gift.
I love that you drew that link. I've never heard anyone say that, but yes, we should be thinking about this in that same way, because in essence, they are donors. It's just donors of talent and different skills. And so bravo to you. I love that, because I think if we paint that picture, it's a lot easier for nonprofits to understand, and then, make sure that they are communicating impact and building the relationships and staying in touch and showing, what the impact of that specific engagement, looks like and how that works. That's just super brilliant. This has been fascinating, and I have really enjoyed, Rachel, having you on and coming to us in a very busy day for you. And so I appreciate that you stepped in and rearranged things so that we could chat with you. Rachel Hutchisson, CEO of Common Impact. Check out commonimpact.org, and you can learn more about their work, how they go about it, get ideas on what skills-based volunteerism is. I mean, you touched on technology, marketing, HR, policies, procedures, operations. Absolutely fascinating. And Rachel, when you put it up against that white little fence that needs to be painted, wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to forever hold that in my brain, because
that's right. And I love what you said, charitable giving is really important, but generosity comes in all forms, and giving your time and skills, to me, is a hugely significant way people show that they're generous.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we do need to be thinking bigger than just the checkbook, because I think that we build engagement, and that to me is the biggest powerful metric or impact, right? I mean, when we engage people, we engage them in a lot of ways. It shows up differently at one point in a life versus at another point in a life, right? And that's based on economics and what your resources are and things of that nature. But Very, very interesting conversation, especially at this time of year. Rachel Hutchisson, CEO of Common Impact. This has been great. I suspect we're going to get you back on to talk about other things.
That would be great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's just been wonderful. It's been really, really great. Hey, we get a lot of skills from our presenting sponsors as well. I mean, they help us and connect us all the time to different things going on. And these folks include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, Fundraisers Friday, Your Part-Time Control, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that are rowing together with us so that we can achieve mission and vision and value. Rachel, we sign off every episode with this mantra, and it means different things to me every day. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, Rachel.